Okay, my dear friends, good evening to you all for joining this particular important session on approach to fever of short duration. And I am really glad that you have all joined in large numbers. The most important thing is that approach to fever is not something new for all those who are attending this particular session, but the presence of these COVID-19 at the back of our mind, I call this as COVIDized minds. So that is something which is very important, and we have to look at every child coming to us with fever with that particular angle. Okay, that means a child coming to you for a fever of short duration, we always think about viral illnesses and bacterial illnesses and all, but now we have to look at all these from the background of COVID-19. That is one. Recently a child came to me, and he presented with fever for about 5 days, and I was just wondering as to, he was about a year old child, and he was otherwise okay, but he had red eye, and he had inflammation around the BCG scar, he had cracking of the lips, he had a strawberry tongue. And then when I inquired, this particular child has had history of COVID about a month back. So these children have also started coming with the post COVID syndrome. So we have to be really really careful when we are dealing with these children, and these children need to have their antibody levels done. So we will discuss some of these points in today's talk. We will try to keep it brief but to the point. And remember that the degrees that I have here, they are the degrees which have some different meaning for many of us as the days advance. So MD slowly starts becoming mentally dull, DNB starts becoming diagnosis not bothered, FIAP starts becoming famous for irrational antibiotic practices, and MRCP becomes medical representative coached pediatrician. So we get all these degrees as we progress. But after listening to today's talk, I hope this doesn't happen. I would request all my colleagues who are above 65 to be careful and examine children with fever only with lot of comfort if you are less than 65 in age, if you are immunocompetent, and you are COVID-19 negative. This is for the benefit of patients also, but be careful. And remember, this lecture is basically for IAP members. These are the intelligence wise average pediatricians. Okay, because after passing MD, we get divided into three types of doctors: those who are HIP, the ones who have high intelligence, so I call them as highly intelligent pediatricians. There are others who are low intelligence pediatricians, they take a lot of time to get through their post graduation, and rest are like you and me, who are the intelligence wise average pediatricians. So we should know what is common, because to know the common presentations of common illnesses is very important. And many times in life we come to know that we make mistakes in common things only. We do not make mistakes in diagnosis of some rare disorders, because rare disorders rarely present. So let us be clear about our basics, and I will like to explain with the help of a case, which is a 14-month-old boy, 9 kg in weight, fully immunized, and he has come to you with high fever going on for the last 2 days. The maximum temperature that he has is 103 degrees. The fever has been of sudden onset, and he really has nothing else. Okay, mother gives him paracetamol drops, and at 103, mother gives a second dose 1 hour after the first and places him in a cold water bath, but he objects to it vehemently, and he doesn't like all that. Okay, and he refused solid foods, but he is taking breastfeeds and the urine output is good. He doesn't have any vomiting, the stools are normal. He is a bit fussy, and the grandmother feels that he is getting a new molar, and that's why he is fussy. Okay, so the physical examination is otherwise unremarkable. This is a common case that we get, only fever. Okay, and the only finding is that a fever of about 102 degrees. So the mother is crying and saying, doctor, please do something. He will throw a fit, he will get a convulsion, or he will develop a brain damage because the neighbor's son had a febrile convulsion. So remember, my dear friends, people are always worried about fever, and fever is the most common symptom, the bread and butter of our practice. This is because there is a lot of parental anxiety which is associated with this particular complaint, whether he will get a fit, whether his brain will get damaged, whether I need to start with anything immediately like an antibiotic, whether I need to admit, and so on and so forth. So parents have lot many queries in their mind, and that is why the first thing whenever a child comes to you with fever of a short duration is to reassure them. Okay, so I will of course tell you about the examination, and after examinations, once you are confirming yourself that there is nothing to worry about, then reassure them and tell them that fever is almost always a friend, and fever is protective. Okay, it inhibits pathogens, and the fever results from cytokines which are meant to enhance the immunity. Okay, the T lymphocytes, the macrophages, and all these, they are, whenever there is fever, they are present in the blood, and the immunity is supposed to be the best at 103 degrees Fahrenheit. So the first thing you must say is that fever is a friend and not an enemy. Okay, and just to give you some more about this, fever which is less than 100 degrees is beneficial. And as I told you, if it is not associated with any discomfort, you need not try to suppress the fever. The commonest mistake which parents do, and quite a few of my colleagues, they feel that the number is to be treated. The number of 100, 101, 102 does not need a treatment. Okay, it is the comfort which needs to be looked into. Okay, so if the fever is above 100, and if it is discomforting, then only use paracetamol, and the dose of paracetamol is 15 milligram per kilogram per dose. This is another common mistake. People do not know the dose, and they just give 1 teaspoon TID of every medicine to every child, which is not something right. So remember that every dose is 15 mg per kg. And in case if the fever is above 104, it's still beneficial, but it may harm, and that's why you have to use paracetamol and do tepid water sponging. It's tepid water, warm water, tap water, not the cold water. Remember that. We'll come to that again. So whenever a patient comes to the OPD, please see whether he's really sick. If he's sick, not drinking milk, inactive, lethargic, lying down and really not getting up from the bed, really sick, okay, then you have to obviously hospitalize him. If he is a child in your OPD with chicken pox, you are worried about other children, so quickly examine and send him back as fast as possible. If he has 105 degrees, the parents, they are looking at you, Dr. Job, you are sitting in your cabin comfortably, and my child has 105 degrees, and you are not taking any action. So please don't do that. Ask your assistant to give paracetamol and make them wait. Many a times, if a child comes in the morning, early hours of OPD, I make them wait till the OPD gets over. It shows your concern. It also avoids their admission. Remember, and if there is something infective, please see that your receptionist or the assistant is, trained in a way that they, make these people comfortable and isolate them for some time. Suppose if he has chicken pox, as I told you, please keep them in a separate room. And remember some important questions. Number one, as soon as the fever comes to you, just look at the child and ask certain questions. Number one, is this particular child serious? Number two, does he need hospitalization? Number three, whether this particular problem is fatal. And number four, whether I need to do anything immediately. So these four questions have to be there at the back of your mind, so that your antenna has to be always up. Because over years what has happened is, first 3 days fever, don't worry, it's viral. So that's a common, interpretation by many of our colleagues. But at the same time, you have to be very careful when you are looking at a child with fever. Okay, and how to find out the seriousness on day one is by looking at sensorium. Is he drowsy? Is he lethargic? Is hyper irritable? Okay, that is sensorium. Remember, this mnemonic stops. And temperature, is it unstable? Sometimes, he is showing hyperthermia. Sometimes, I have seen children with hypothermia also, particularly neonates who have a serious problem. Then oliguria, it indicates that the child is having peripheral circulatory failure. He is probably going to shock. That's why you have to also look out for perfusion by the capillary refill time, either on the sternum or some other particular places. And then you have to look out for patch of diphtheria. Remember, diphtheria is a disease which is down but not out. Still, we keep getting cases of diphtheria. And that's why, remember, you have to give the first year booster and also the second booster at the end of 5 years. It is very important. And then look out for the spots. That is the rash. Many a times on the first or the second day, in case if you get a purpuronecrotic rash suggestive of meningococcal infection, you have to be careful. Though it's not very common, you have to be careful. That's why, remember, this mnemonic, also train your assistants to look into all this. To show you, there is a round board which I have kept in my hospital, and some of you who can look at it, just see, this is a round board, and every round board has some instruction. Suspect malaria if, Okay, so it is written on this: suspect malaria if there is fever with pallor, suspect malaria if there is fever with splenomegaly, suspect fever malaria if there is fever with pallor with splenomegaly, and so on and so forth. So what you should remember is that whenever a child is brought to you and when he is admitted, the residents must continue to learn, and that's why keep the round boards with some instructions onto them. Okay, and then also remember that whenever you are examining a child and taking the temperature, the record is important. The recorder, that means the one who records the temperature, he is important, and the ritual, that is the technique of measuring the temperature, is important. And that is why, my dear friends, the thermometer is the first prescription which has to be given to the patients. That is the first prescription, and you must train the parents to measure the temperature properly. The best place to measure temperature at all ages is the axillary temperature, remember. And whenever you put the thermometer, for example, if this is a thermometer, then the end where there is the sensitive end, that is the mercury, it has to go into the axilla in a vertical position so that it goes into the armpit. Okay, it is many times seen that people use it horizontally, and the sensitive end of the thermometer many times is projecting outside the axilla, measuring the room temperature, which is the commonest mistake. And that's why keep it vertical in the armpit, and then you fold the shoulder, put your hand onto the other hand, and then you keep it there for 5 minutes. Remember, if you keep it longer, then you can detect hypothermia better. Okay, that's the reason why you should keep it between 3 to 5 minutes, but in general 3 minutes is more than enough. And whenever the record is properly recorded, it has to be put on a graph. Okay, remember, many times parents come to me and they continuously keep calling, Dr. Jog, now the temperature is 99.6, Dr. Jog, now the temperature is 101.6. Likewise, if they keep calling me for all the 3, 4, 5, 6 days, Dr. Jog's life will be miserable. And that's why what I do is I teach them how to record the temperature and tell them, see, this is a temperature chart. When you go home, please record it at an interval of 2 hours and 20 minutes. So if they are given some odd number, which of course doesn't have any scientific basis, then they will be kept busy and they will not, eat your head. Okay, remember that. Of course, remember that axillary temperature is extremely important. In the neonates, some people, they take rectal temperature. There is a definite way of measuring a rectal temperature, but slowly and gradually the rectal temperature is also going out of fashion. There are different ways of measuring the temperature, like the measurement of the temperature of the tympanic membrane, then the temperature on the forehead. And we, during these COVID times, many times we see the security guard and others checking the temperature very often. However, all these are relatively nearby the true temperature, but for a screening purpose they are okay. Okay, and now you must know that if you start following one method, then you have to stick to that method. Otherwise, in the morning you will check the oral temperature, in the afternoon rectal, in the evening axillary. That's not correct. Okay, and remember that the most important point to be remembered about the antipyretics, okay, is that the maternal anxiety is extremely important in a case who has fever. Okay, and for a mother, there is no fever which is a fever of short duration. For her, every fever is important. But tell her that it is not necessary that every time that fever should come below 99. We are reducing discomfort, and there are quite a few medications available in the market. Paracetamol is the drug of choice. Okay. Ibuprofen is also given alternately with paracetamol with good number of references, particularly if the fever doesn't come down after 1.5 or 2 hours, but you have to use it separately. The traditional romance of paracetamol and ibuprofen is not rational. Okay, so divorce them, keep them away, and remember that these two medicines are to be used separately. Though majority of my colleagues, they would like to use the plus combinations, remember you have to be very, very careful. Why we are so careful is because whenever we use combinations or medications like say mefenamic acid, these are very potent. The fever goes down, it remains low, and the internal problem, the pathology, the disease process continues. I have seen a child who was being given mefenamic acid round the clock 8 hourly by the parents in full dose, and the child developed pneumonia. The pneumonia turned into effusion, then into empyema, and by the time the child was brought, he was showing low temperature, but he had empyema. So remember, some of these are very potent medications. Diclofenac is an analgesic. There are quite a few of my colleagues who take pride in giving injectable diclofenac, and some of my friends who practice in the rural sector, they have a formula: 10 kg child, 1 cc injectable diclofenac; 20 kg child, 2 cc injectable diclofenac. Please keep away from injectable antibiotics. They many times produce hypotension. Okay, remember. And that's why paracetamol is the drug of choice. Okay, it's an ideal antibiotic. As I told you, ibuprofen is an alternative. Nimesulide is not safe. And whenever you are having children who are presenting to us with incomplete Kawasaki-like picture or post-COVID problems, where you have to give aspirin, if children unfortunately get flu, then we are all aware about the Rye syndrome, and that's why aspirin is to be avoided in other cases, and you have to be very, very careful. Okay, and many times the pattern of fever, okay, that's a clue to the diagnosis. So when you use potent antibiotics, the clue is blunted. So whenever the fever reaches the peak, I would like to know whether it is reaching 105, 106, so that I can get a clue to the diagnosis. But if you are using a potent antibiotic like nimesulide, then the peak will not be seen. Continuously the temperature will be low, and I will be deceived. Many of my friends, in fact, I also saw one case of acute lymphatic leukemia. The child was, in fact, a child with a hematological malignancy, and the fever was being suppressed by nimesulide. So quite a few illnesses can get masked by the use of the potent antibiotics. Okay, and my dear friends, question is whether we need to use injectable or per rectal. Injectable is a big no-no unless the child is really vomiting very bad. He is in the intensive care. But as far as possible, no. Per rectal, again, whenever the child is not accepting the medication orally at all, or if it's the post-operative period, or if the child is mentally challenged, sometimes we have to resort to the paracetamol suppositories. The dose is again 15 mg per kg, and the impact remains for about 4 to 6 hours. Now remember, if there is no response to paracetamol, I told you one can use ibuprofen, but the interfebrile period of the child is extremely important. Interfebrile period means in between the two peaks of fever, how is the child? How is he behaving? If he's playful, as soon as the fever goes down, very good, it's more likely to be viral. If he's not playful, in between two peaks of fever, the child is sick, mother says, डॉक्टर साहब बुखार तो कम हो गया लेकिन अभी तक खेलता नहीं है, खाता नहीं है. So all these indicate that there is likelihood of a bacterial infection. And whether there is any role of cold or tepid sponging. All of us have grown watching Hindi movies showing the old mother or the grandmother enacted by Nirupa Roy or Kamini Kaushal and others. माथे पे पट्टी रखते, बेटे बुखार कम हो जाएगा, फिकर मत करो. That is not the proper way. You have to remove all the clothes, you have to expose the entire body and give a good tepid sponging, warm water sponging. Avoid cold and ice cold water. That is because it will produce vasoconstriction, which will be counterproductive. And my dear friends, tepid sponging is to be done. The body is to be kept open because we are allowing the heat to dissipate by evaporation. Okay, so the filmy way of keeping the putty on the forehead is to be out. Okay, some people have a misconception that fever is associated with dentition and diarrhea. This is of course to be told to the parents that it is nothing to do with dentition. And my dear friends, there are parents who would always ask you whether there is any relation to the age of the child. Okay, so now the same parent who brings a newborn or a baby under the age of 3 months having fever is to be looked at differently than a child of older age, because in the younger age, under the age of 3 months, there is an entity called as SBI, that is serious bacterial infection. Remember, the organisms like pneumococcus, the Haemophilus influenzae, meningococcus, all these are seen in the blood, and they produce what is called as bacteremia. Okay, And bacteremia is something that is the presence of bacteria in the blood. But we are not worried about bacteremia. We are worried about meningitis. Okay. And that is why whenever there is bacteremia, the child has 2% chance of getting into the brain meningitis. It is still more when it is Haemophilus influenzae, and it is still more when it is meningococcus. Now we have been giving pentavalent vaccine. So Haemophilus influenzae is now being given to children. We have been giving pneumococcal vaccine. That's why the incidence of pneumococcus to some extent is also on the lower side, though not to a great extent. But the immunization status in that particular country will decide the organism which will produce bacteremia. I hope you understand what I'm saying. So the age of the child is having very close relation. And an older child, suppose there is a child who is above 3 years, he has high fever above 104, he has leukocytosis, then there are more chances that the child has a serious bacterial infection. Though height of the fever is not a correlation between viral and bacterial, but in general we should be alert that these children are likely to have bacterial infection. And we have been learning about the intermittent fever, the remittent fever, the Pell-Epstein fever of Hodgkin's disease, and the biphasic fevers, and so many others. They are important provided the child has not received antipyretics. But I don't think there is any parent or any pediatrician who does not give antipyretics when your child has fever. So the pattern of fever many times is not useful. Okay. However, in endemic areas where malaria is rampant, the pattern of alternate day fever or fever after 48 hours, 72 hours, that does have some importance. Now, there are parents who say, sir, my child gets fever only during night time. And if you go into the details of history, the mother is nicely giving the antibiotics in the morning, giving antibiotics in the afternoon and in the evening. But at night, she forgets to give the dose. And obviously, the child gets fever at night. So there is, something which you must remember as a part of common sense. I told you about the serious bacterial infection. There are parents who will ask you, sir, what is the risk of febrile convulsions? Remember, the febrile convulsions, though they are the convulsions which occur with fever, the height of fever or the rate of rise of fever and the connection with febrile convulsion has been discussed to a great extent. Please tell them that the height of fever is not connected with febrile convulsion. Also tell the parents that it is not proved that the febrile convulsion produces brain damage. Only if it is a status, okay, febrile status epilepticus like problem, then if the child has had some cardiovascular problems, then only there are worries. But parents always have problems related to recurrence of febrile convulsions, then whether this would impact the development of the brain, whether my child will have epilepsy in future, whether my child will become mentally retarded, and parents are really worried. So please see that the anxiety of the parents as connected to febrile seizures is alleviated. Though it is a known evidence-based fact that one episode of febrile convulsion makes the child prone for getting the second episode of convulsion. And I would appeal all of you to read more about febrile seizures, though it's not the topic of the day, but maybe in future we will discuss it in further details. Okay. Now, remember that whenever you have to decide the problem in a particular child, there has to be a reasoning behind the prescription. And the prescription is a 3-step process. So first, find out whether the fever is because of infection or not. Okay. How to know that? Fever is the most common cause of infection, and that's why we will assume that the fever is because of infection. However, there are conditions where fever is not because of infection. For example, a child with malignancy, a child with thyrotoxicosis, a child with some autoimmune disorder. There are some conditions, though not very common, but there are conditions where the infection is not the cause of fever. That's okay. Now, in case if you are convinced that there is an infection and that is the cause of fever, then find out whether it is viral or bacterial. So how to find out viral or bacterial? Though it may be simple, you have to remember, if there is a child who has viral infection, he has involvement of many systems at the same time. So a child with viral fever, if he'll have runny nose, he will have discharge from the eye, he will also have rash on the skin, and he might have diarrhea. So more than one system in a child, viral. while bacterial infections are localized. So the child will have a follicle on the tonsil and a tender lymph node, that is bacterial. This child won't have diarrhea, this child won't have pneumonia. Okay. Another thing, within the family, more than one member involved. Dr. Jog is unwell, his wife is unwell, his children are unwell, his grandparents are unwell. It means it is viral. Bacterial usually involves only one person. Okay. And within the community, suppose if I live in a society, if there are people who are my neighbors, if my family is affected, the neighbor's family is affected, that means more than a family in the community, that is viral. So more than one system in a child, more than one member of the family, and more than one family in the society, that is viral. While bacterial infections in general are localized, I already told you that the interfebrile period in a child with viral infection, the child is normal. While bacterial infection, the interfebrile period, the child is still sick, not eating well. Remember the mnemonic PES, playing, eating, and smiling. If that's the case, in between the 2 episodes of fever after giving antibiotics, it's viral. Okay. And now, in case if it is bacterial, what is the likely organism? This is something difficult. You come to know it through experience. You examine the child. He has a patch, a lobar pneumonia. Probably the organism is pneumococcus. Otitis media, this is the organism. Streptococcal pharyngotonsillitis, streptococcus. So many organisms are there, and gradually we come to know organisms like mycoplasma. We will come to that in a minute. So can you identify the enemy? So if the onset is with cold and sneezing, I am always relaxed because it's a rhinovirus, which is common cold. The upper airway is involved. There is either mild fever or no fever. There is no exhaustion. Children play well. Influenza, parainfluenza, respiratory syncytial virus, very simple. Along with high fever, if there is prominent headache, constitutional symptoms, myalgia, extreme exhaustion, then think of flu. If it's an adenovirus, there is a pharyngoconjunctival fever with diarrhea. We all know that there could be mesenteric lymphadenopathy and hemorrhagic cystitis. So adenovirus is a bit different. In a child under the age of 1, if there is bronchiolitis, then it's the respiratory syncytial virus. And my dear friends, we all know that fever with dry cough, these days we suspect COVID-19. And in case if it is a enemy which is likely to be a bacterium, then if there is fever with follicular tonsillitis with tender cervical node, it is streptococcus. If there is fever with grunting and tachypnea, it's pneumococcus. If it's a rapid progression and the child is toxic, it is staphylococcus. And if the child is above 5 years and predominantly presenting with cough, it's mycoplasma. Remember, my dear friends, whenever a child comes for fever and cough, you have to differentiate two important things. Mother says, "Bachche ko bukhar hai," the child has fever and he has cough also. So you ask her, what is the status at night? She says, "Itna khas raha tha, he was coughing so lot, so lot." और बहन जी बुखार कितना है? नहीं, बुखार तो ज्यादा नहीं है. That indicates hyperactive airway disease. On the other hand, the mother says बुखार और खांसी, fever and cough. बहन जी ज्यादा क्या है? She says, इतना ताप, बुखार से इतना इतना परेशान, माथे पे पट्टी इधर उधर, फिर भी बुखार नहीं उतर गया. खांसी नहीं, खांसी तो इतनी नहीं है. So when she says that the fever is the predominant symptom, remember it is more likely to be a low respiratory infection, and grunting goes more in favor of pneumococcal pneumonia. Okay. And as I already told you, viral or bacterial, and cough more than fever or fever more than cough. If there is sneeze along with wheeze, always remember you are not supposed to give any antibiotic. And there are conditions called as Walleri. These are the wheeze associated lower respiratory infections where many times children are okay, non-toxic, but in case of pneumonias, the picture is overlapping, but the child is not well, he is toxic. Okay. So remember, in a child who has sneezing and wheezing, okay, you are not supposed to give antibiotics because these are almost always viral problems. Okay. Now, where are you supposed to be worried about? So if the child is unresponsive, the child has rash with purple or blood colored spots, the child is excessively crying, which indicates either meningitis or acute otitis media or urinary tract infection. The child has severe difficulty in breathing. The child has bluish lips or face, cyanosis. The child is holding the right iliac fossa, maybe appendicitis. Or an older child who is brought being lifted because of weakness, he is not able to walk also. Maybe you can suspect dengue. So all these are conditions where you have to be very, very careful. And now these are the days of telemedicine. You are being called by the mother for consultation for a 7-year-old, your regular patient with history of pain in the throat and a fever for the last 2 days, and the fever is about 100, and the child has pain while swallowing the food. Okay, your regular patient, you will advise some antihistaminic along with an antipyretic, and just ask them to keep a watch on the particular child. However, if there is a 4-year-old with history of high grade fever and cough going on for 4 days, these days you will not be quiet. The mother notices that the child is breathing fast from today, so there is history of wheezing in the past, that's okay, and the child has been nebulized couple of the times in the past, that's also fine. So you ask them to count the respiratory rate, and on telephone, how to ask them to count respiratory rate? Keep a piece of paper on the chest and see the movement of the paper up and down, count as one, and just see, you know, the formula of 50 and 60. You know, if a child between 2 months and 1 year, if he has a respiratory rate of more than 50, it goes more in favor of pneumonias, and above 1 year, if it's above 60, then it's pneumonia. So you have to count the respiratory rate. However, things are not that easy in teleconsultation, but if you suspect something which is not going well, please tell them to come to the clinic or ask them to contact a COVID OPD, because some of these respiratory symptoms need to be looked into in a different angle. As I told you, all of us are now looking at all the fevers with COVIDized background. Okay. And another mother who calls for 2-month-old and wants a teleconsultation, and she says that there is fever for 2 days and there is no cough, cold, loose motions, vomiting. But look at the age of the child, 2 months. Okay, so please tell the mother, sorry madam, you will have to bring a child to me under the age of 3 months. Please do not prescribe paracetamol, whatever may be the case. Ask them to come to the casualty. Okay. And remember that the telephonic consultation is basically to divide the patients, triage the patients into sick, non-sick. And under the age of 3 months, it's a big no-no. If the fever is going on for a longer time, 3, 4, 5 days, no teleconsultation. Only if the patient is known to you, only if it's a fresh illness, started today morning, yesterday evening, and it's a fever of short duration, you can give the treatment accordingly. Okay. That's the advantages of teleconsultation. The child is in a comfortable zone. Okay, because he is not afraid that Dr. Jog will give a prick. Okay. Father is also comfortable because he doesn't have to drive all the way to Dr. Jog's clinic. And then Dr. Jog is comfortable because he is sitting in the living room and getting his consultation charges without exerting much. And you can handle the dil mil combo together. What is this dil mil combo? That is the daughter-in-law, mother-in-law combo. You can, give same advice at the same breath in the same time on the same screen, so that the misconceptions in the minds of both will automatically get neutralized. Okay. This combo is extremely important. I will discuss about it in some other talk, but remember, you have to alleviate the anxiety, and there is a generation gap. The mother-in-law has some concept like dentition is associated with diarrhea, or dentition is associated with fever, while daughter-in-law says no, I have read it n number of times that both are not connected. So they want to listen certain things from your mouth. Okay. And that's why this consultation goes very well. And of course, they get a time, almost 10 minutes of the dedicated time from Dr. Jog, which otherwise in a busy OPD might have been difficult. Okay. And for those who want everything free, now, for example, in Pune, there are many Punekars who always want everything. So the advice which you have to give to parents who call you after 10 p.m. for any problem is only water. So if it is fever, tepid sponging with water. If it is cough, it is warm water with honey. If it is diarrhea, it is oral rehydration solution, that is salt sugar solution in water. Okay. So for almost all the complaints, the only advice on phone is water, because there are very clever patients who do not want to bring the child to you for minor complaints, but they are not the ones who should decide whether it is minor or major. It is you that you have to decide. So please tell them to bring the child to the OPD next day, unless it's very, very urgent that they need something. So that's an individual decision. Remember, medico-legally also, the advice on the telephone is not something which is advisable. Okay. So there are certain challenges when you are dealing with children. So these days, these children may be asymptomatic carriers. These children, even with mild upper respiratory symptoms, can be infective to the grandparents. So never commit a mistake of keeping the children with the grandparents when the husband and the wife are COVID positive. Remember, child is a child. He won't be sick. Okay, physical distancing from mother or a pediatrician is a big joke as regards children. Hand hygiene and coughing etiquettes are simply not possible in children. Crying releases lot many aerosols, and the relatives accompanying the child can also infect you. So please, my dear friends, be careful. On n number of occasions during last 9 to 10 months, we have seen children as the carriers and the spreaders of COVID infection to the others. Okay. Now, remember that every person coming with fever, cough, cold is corona, unless proved otherwise. The days are not yet over. Look at the temperature, see whether this child is sick, see whether you are getting a clear cut focus, see whether this child has tachypnea. And of course, there are some indicators, the negative predictors. A child who has been fever for 20-25 days, obviously less likely to be a COVID chap. And of course, CRP, which is almost negative. So remember, all these things are to be remembered when you deal with a child. And on day one, remember, you have to see all those things starting from the alphabet T. So face of the child, whether he is looking toxic. Okay. Tense fontanelle. In a child who is under the age of 18 months, you must palpate the fontanelle, particularly when he is not crying, to rule out increase in the intracranial pressure. Then look at the throat and look at the teeth. Now, examination of the throat is extremely important, and you have to use good quality tongue depressors. I have seen so many doctors, they get the chocobar sticks as a gift from the representatives. They break when they are inside the mouth, and the child starts bleeding, and it becomes a very joking stuff in front of everyone. So please use good quality tongue depressors, either of steel or of plastic, and examine the throat properly. However, whenever you are examining the child for fever, examination of the chest has to be before examination of the throat. Though the protocol says examine the throat first, if you start putting tongue depressor inside the mouth, the child will start crying, and your entire respiratory examination will go haywire. And that's why, please remember that you examine the respiratory system with the help of a stethoscope first. Okay. Also examine the tympanic membrane. It has a diagnostic value, and use a good quality otoscope. Look at the tympanic membrane, whether the drum is bulging, whether it is red. And please remember, my teacher used to tell me that you have to examine twice the number of patients, twice the number of patients, the eardrums. That means if you get 50 patients in the OPD, you have to examine 100 eardrums. You have to get acquainted with that. The people, particularly the non-resident Indians, particularly they come to India in the months of December, and at that particular juncture, many times they will bring the child to you for examination, and if you forget to examine the tympanic membrane, then they won't be happy, because it is extremely important to diagnose otitis media after examination of a tympanic membrane. I remember some of my colleagues, when they started practice, they never knew all this, and that's why I remember they had used once a laryngoscope, once a fundoscope for examining the ear. The days are gone. Some or the other people don't know how the otoscope looks like, but that's not the way to do that. So please, if you do not have an otoscope in the OPD, right in the morning tomorrow, the first thing that you are going to do is to get an otoscope. Okay. And palpate the tender cervical nodes. Remember, there are very few indications for giving an antibiotic on day one. One of them is follicular tonsillitis with a tender cervical node. Okay. Another one is a bacillary dysentery. There are very few indications for giving antibiotics on day one of fever. So palpate the cervical nodes. Also, remember to count the respiratory rate and see whether it is out of proportion to fever. Also palpate the abdomen. In case if there is tenderness in the right iliac fossa, please remember appendicitis. And in pediatric practice, this particular problem of appendicitis may not come with classical picture. It all depends on the position of the appendix. Most of us know that. So the pain initially may be periumbilical, and then it may get localized, or the child may get burning micturition because of the position of the appendix, so and so forth. Also try to look out for the genitals. Of course, in a male child, I call it as a totaram. And remember, don't forget totaram, because he is the one who will give you clue in case if there is pus from the urethral opening, you will be able to diagnose the focus. And recently I had a child who was crying excessively and was having high fever. I just put him on the tummy and looked at the back, and there was a huge cellulitis in the back. So remember to turn the child on the back. And for all this, you have to totally undress the child so that you can also examine the joints, and also you can look for eschar at certain places, particularly behind the ear, then under the scrotum. Okay, see, in the rural areas, quite a few times the children are lying down, and the ticks, they will bite from below. So when a child is lying down, the tick will bite behind the ear, or it will bite under the scrotum. So that is the reason why you get the ischars. Ischar is nothing but the place where the tick bites, and then there is surrounding erythema, which is a feature of rickettsial disorders. So my dear friends, when you get a child these days, please see that you keep the baby or the child in the mother's lap or the chair, and avoid the table, and use approximate weight. Do not weigh on the common scale, and they let the examination be a quick one. And you can examine the child from the back, that means from the back of the child, so that it doesn't directly cough on your face. Keep a pulse oximeter, and also remember not to nebulize children in the clinic, and disinfect your stethoscope, the thermometer, and the pulse oximeter probe with alcohol in between patients, and have a good hand hygiene after every patient on the gloves. You wear the gloves and use alcohol on the gloves. And my dear friends, at the end of this examination, you will be left out with certain options. So you can give them symptomatic management. Yes, I will do that. You have to speak out. Okay, please tell them that I will like you to come again, and I will like to re-evaluate as a part of follow-up. But many of us behave as if Fevicol has been applied to the bottom of the tongue. And as the age advances, I don't know whether our Broca's area starts shrinking, but we speak so less that the parents do not know what to do. Okay, when I call the patients again, I never charge them. That is because I am learning. I want to know whether at the end of 3 days the child has improved, whether this viral infection was really viral or something else is coming up. Okay, and there are other things that you could do. Probably you could send the child to the pathologist, but not usually on day 1 or day 2. And then, of course, those who are very business minded, they may put the child on saline and hospitalize, an option which is not a right one. And some of us might start the antibiotic, which is also not a right option. So the only option is symptomatic management. Reassure by speaking out, and ask them to follow up after 2 or 3 days. Now, when the child is being seen on day 1, there are certain situations, particularly bronchiolitis. Okay, particularly a child with only red throat, then a child with pus cells in the urine but only 4 or 5 pus cells. These are the situations where you are not supposed to give antibiotics. So I have seen doctors who immediately put their pen down and start prescribing antibiotics for any child with cough and cold. A situation which is not correct. So I call them as shake hand situations. Your hand must shake when you prescribe antibiotics for these conditions. Watery diarrhea, for example, we all know it's viral diarrhea. The onset was with vomiting, and within 24 hours the child has started purging and watery stools. So please remember, some conditions, but these are the common conditions, almost 80 to 90% conditions, they don't require antibiotics on day 1. And that's why I told you that there are hardly 1 or 2 or 3 conditions which require antibiotics on day 1. Now, in our case, the child who came to us for fever, and the mother was worried about the high fever, the story unfolded the very next day, and there was sudden disappearance of fever, and there was appearance of rash. That means the fever disappeared and the rash appeared. This is a classical case of exanthem subitum, also known as roseola infantum. My dear friends, there are quite a few situations in pediatric practice where you get fever along with rash. And we have a very famous mnemonic which goes as very sick persons must take double treatment. And this gives you the appearance of rash in relation to the day of fever. So if you get a child with fever for one day and you get a vesicular rash on day 1 of fever, then it means it is varicella. Okay, sick, it stands for scarlet fever. Okay, that S. On day 2, you get, rash, which is of scarlet fever, like what you say, sandpaper rash. Then on day 3 of fever, we used to get rash in case of smallpox. Day 4 of fever, we get the rash of measles. And that's why whenever there is any child who comes to you for a fever of 3 days with, the eyes which are typically measly face with eyes, typical eyes of measles, you must always remember to look at the Koplik spots on day 3. But don't forget to say that it can turn out to be measles tomorrow. Day 5 of fever, along with rash usually appearing on the day 5, that is typhus, that is rickettsia. Day 6 of fever and the rash, that is dengue. And day 7, little later, that is typhoid. These are not the hard and fast rules, but roughly you should know that the appearance of rash has some relation to the timing, and this mnemonic will probably help you to remember. Okay, and now the child has come to you, it's day 3. I told you that sometimes I give him a temperature chart, so they have brought the temperature chart as per your advice, and now you don't have a clue, so you tell them to get the child investigated, and then you go for a complete blood count, which includes the total count, differential count, and platelets. This gives hell of a lot of information. However, remember, on day 1 these investigations are not required. Neutrophils can always be there at day 1, but they don't give any clue to diagnosis. Platelets, remember, if there is thrombocytopenia or thrombocytosis, they do give a good clue. For example, the child which I told you in the beginning, the one who had the typical presentation like Kawasaki, has a platelet count of almost 8 or 10 lakhs, that is thrombocytosis. While patients who have say typhoid, for example, little later, they do get thrombocytopenia. Dengue patients, for example, they get thrombocytopenia. So depending on the relative increase or decrease in the total count of the white cells and the relative increase or decrease of the platelets, you can come to some conclusion. So if you know the clinical picture of an organism, I will tell you, every organism has a tempo. Just as individuals have their own personality. For example, pneumococcus, it has its own personality. Staphylococcal respiratory infections, their own personality. Okay, then Salmonella typhi, rickettsia, dengue, all these have their own way. So the calendar of events which occurs in each organism will guide you to the diagnosis of that particular organism. That's why you have to be well read about all these disorders. Okay, and the C-reactive proteins will give some idea. For example, if a child has fever for 5 or 6 days and the CRP is negative, okay, and this particular child, there is a confusion whether it is dengue or whether it is typhoid, then of course you will go for a viral infection. While in case if the CRP is increased, we will think on some other lines. Remember to send the blood culture on day 3 in case if the diagnosis of fever is not done. These are called as cases of fever without source, FWS, or fever without focus. Okay, so please see that you send the blood culture before starting antibiotics. And in addition to blood, you have to send the urine examination for routine and culture. Also, if there is a suspicion of respiratory involvement, please go ahead and get an X-ray of the chest. But do not forget to say that this may turn out to be measles tomorrow if it's day 3. Now, collection of urine is extremely important. See, if you take children where you don't get focus, that means fever without focus, then the first thing you must remember on day 3 is to send the urine for routine and culture. Very important, because urinary infection is one of the important causes of fever without focus, which we always forget. Reflexly we send the child for a hemogram and examination of the blood, but urine examination many times is forgotten. Don't forget it. Also remember, you have to collect the urine properly, because children in the house, they keep running here and there, they pass urine anywhere, the urine is collected in any way, it reaches the laboratory in any way, and ultimately the results that you get are not reflecting the real situation in that particular child. So you have to be very, very careful. Okay, and now we'll see some other situations where a 4-year-old child was diagnosed as acute viral infection. The fever subsided on day 4, but it recurred after 24 hours. Now what is the action at this stage? Now here on day 5, the fever is of moderate intensity, but the child is drowsy. Okay, that is day 5. You expected that everything should go on, everything should be well by day 5, but the child is drowsy. So the fever has again occurred, it means this is a biphasic fever. So this is a second phase, which is the immune phase. This is indicative of something else, and the child is also drowsy. Now, why there should be drowsiness? This could be related to the central nervous system. Drowsiness could be because of hypoperfusion, or it could be because of hypoxia. But now this child doesn't have a reason, any reason to be hypoxic. So hypoperfusion without obvious fluid loss is the problem. So there is fluid loss somewhere, and that is called as a capillary leak. And that's why, remember to be aware of the unanticipated progress. That's why every child on day 4, please ask them to report to you. Okay. And in case if there is a behavior change after day 4, remember it's a parameter of seriousness. And in conditions like dengue, you have to be alert on day 5 and day 6. Okay. On day 5, the parents now come to you and say, Dr. Joe, fever is still not going down. What to do? So tell them there are only 3 possibilities. Either it is viral, bacterial, or parasitic. Now you have said almost 30, 40 different diagnoses in these 3 words, but just keep quiet, investigate more. And in case if you get a child who has a problem on day 5, remember there are certain conditions, particularly dengue, you have to keep at the back of mind. Okay. Day 5 and day 6 for dengue are very, very important, and you should not give antibiotics. We are going to discuss some aspects of prolonged fevers in one of our talks, and that's why I will just tell you that there is a 4-year-old child who presents with fever for 5 days and excessive irritability. There are no other symptoms, and the child is otherwise normal. Okay, remember the fever is going on for 5 days. How should we proceed? Here is a child with fever without any localization, but there is irritability, which is suggestive of some different things. So irritability generally suggests pain or brain cell irritation. Now, if there is a pain without any localization, then it could be either from the bones or from the muscles, and that's why you have to look out carefully for leukemia and Kawasaki syndrome. Remember, children with Kawasaki disease are extremely irritable. Okay, and behavioral change, again I'm telling you, is a parameter of seriousness. Okay, so the approach to fever as it evolves on different days is like this. So on day 1 and 2, you have to rule out seriousness. I asked you to remember 4 questions: whether it is serious, whether I need to hospitalize, whether it is fatal, and do I need to treat urgently. Okay, keep a watch, observe, and give paracetamol alone if you are not able to find the focus, but try to look out for a focus. So try to send the blood culture, try to send the urine for routine and examination, do the blood count, look at the platelets, and clinically or by minimum and relevant tests, please follow up this child. And then you can come to a conclusion of viral or tonsillopharyngitis or a serious bacterial infection or a urinary tract infection or dengue or malaria or enteric fever or hepatitis. Okay. And day 5 and 7, if you get a diagnosis from blood culture, then of course you can shout eureka, eureka, assess the progress of the fever, and review this particular child. But in case if you are not getting any clue, then please rule out Kawasaki disease and enteric fever. So many times children come to you after 5 or 7 days, so you have to be careful. My dear friends, remember, every disease has its typical progression from day 1 onwards, and that's why if you know the tempo of the organism, it will be very easy for you to come to a diagnosis. Okay. Many times parents ask us, sir, my child gets repeated infections, gets infections almost every month. So jokingly, of course, between you and me, I always tell them, my dear parents, please don't worry, this reflects that your child has good immunity. To some extent it is true, but then please tell them that 8 to 10 viral infections in a year are normal. So these viral infections need not worry you. Okay. Only in case if you find that there is some other problem, if these are recurrent bacterial infections, if they are infections of the ear, if the child is require very strong antibiotics, of course these are conditions which are related to the immunodeficiency, which is not the topic of discussion today. But please remember that parents do come to you for frequent coughs and colds. Tell them that this is absolutely normal, provided the growth chart which you are maintaining is showing a good curve. Okay, it should be upgoing, and that's why maintain the growth charts of all the children in the file that you give them. So my dear friends, now you see what is your type of a pediatrician, whether you're a hit type or a miss type. A HIT type of pediatrician, the one who takes the history, then investigates and then treats. Okay, I hope all of you are of that category. While there are a few who manage first, if the management fails, then they go for investigations. If they don't get any clue from investigations, then they ask for signs and symptoms. So don't be from that miss category. And with that, you will obviously get a degree of MD, which would stand for the one who makes diagnosis, and notes it down. Okay. So if you obviously write the diagnosis viral fever, your hand will shake if you start prescribing the antibiotic. So please note down the diagnosis. Okay. You will get a degree of D and B because you decide the narrowest and the best antibiotic for the child, and you will become famous for intelligent antimicrobial practices. We are going to discuss about antimicrobials in one of the talks, and I will elaborate this further at that juncture. My dear friends, just remember that fever is rarely an emergency, but rule out potentially serious condition. Once ruled out, use paracetamol as and when required, SOS basis, and have a cautious periodic follow-up. Prescribe the antibiotics only if the diagnosis is certain, or in order to give the chance of some other infection, do some relevant tests prior to that. And proper documentation is a must. Do not invent new terminologies. I know one of my friends from southern part of Maharashtra, and for fevers he would not able to diagnose. He would put them as typhomalarial rickettsial fever. I used to laugh at him, but then he never had any clue, and that's why he would combine all the diseases together. So please do not invent new terminologies. I have seen some residents writing CRF. Initially I thought whether it is chronic renal failure, but no. Then they said, sir, it is ceftriaxone responding fever. So I said, this is not the way to write, because ceftriaxone is given for so many conditions. You cannot simply write like that. Of course, I know the days of my residency when similar thing was written, when children used to respond to either chloroquine or chloromycetin. And then at that time, people used to write chloroquine responding fever and chloromycetin responding fevers. So residents these days need not be blamed, my dear friends. But the point is, please try to diagnose the condition. See, if a mistake is not a stepping stone, then it's a mistake. Okay. Every mistake which you commit in your day to day practice should act as a stepping stone. And during this particular journey, you may commit mistakes. You can commit mistakes. My teacher used to say, Pramod, only those who work commit mistakes. So don't feel bad about it. Go ahead. Of course, during your journey, you may commit pitfalls. You may fall into them, but get up from these pitfalls, start walking again. Some patients may leave you, some patients may accompany you, but keep learning, keep a diary of your mistakes. Do not commit the same mistake twice. Continue your journey, and I wish you a happy journey. So thank you, my dear friends, for listening to this particular discussion on fevers of short duration. And if you have some questions, please feel free to ask. There are some questions on the chat box, and there are some questions where some senior pediatricians using paracetamol and mefenamic acid combination, and Dr. Sanjay Mankapuri wants to know whether it is rational. Absolutely no, this is not a rational combination, but people keep using some of these conditions. There is one more question as to what all things need to be told to the parents as regards reduction of fever. Please tell them not to use ice cold water. Please ask them to keep a temperature record, and also please ask them to inform you in case if there is something which goes wrong. There are many things which IAP also has brought forth now, and I am aware of parental guidelines relation to fever. So please go through that. Many parents want to know about the type of the thermometer to be used, then how to do the sponging, and why you call fever as a friend, because we tell the parents that fever is a friend. So there are some from the IT sector who would like to know as to why it is called a friend. So you have to tell them. So unless you read, you will not be able to tell them. There is a question again about the parents. So just tell them not to overclothe the child and keep the child, either the boy or the girl, in a cool, dry environment. And as I told you, do not use aspirin or nimesulide for control of fever. Paracetamol is the safest. And do not keep treating the child at home at least after 2 or 3 days. In case if you have given paracetamol, consult the pediatrician at the earliest. We are going to discuss the significance of Vidal test when we discuss about the prolonged fevers in one of our series. And in case if there are some other questions, you can always ask them at that particular moment. There is a question about the typhi.igm on day 3. There are concerns about the sensitivity and the specificity of Vidal as well as of the typhi.igm, and usually they are not recommended. The gold standard for diagnosis of typhoid is the Vidal test. Okay, and that is why you should always remember that we should discourage the use of typhi.igm or Vidal test. We are of course going to discuss some of these tests and the serology in our series in the forthcoming days. Okay, so I thank you for a patient listening, and in case if there are queries, please keep joining. We have the next lecture on 13th of the next month. We will be discussing some aspects of respiratory infections. We have a talk on prolonged fevers. We have a talk on antibiotics. And in case if you have some queries, keep them jotting down. And during these lectures, we will definitely discuss more in our talks. So thank you again, and we will meet in our next session in the month of February. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pramod Jog. It's an honor to propose vote of thanks to our today's honorable international speaker, Dr. Pramod Jog, for putting forward an excellent presentation on approach to short duration fevers and explaining them in a great way and in a simple and great way. We are happy to express our vote of thanks to all our doctors who had joined us today and made this session interactive by asking questions and posting on our chat box. And I would like to share that thank you for completing this successful ECME session, and would like to inform that our upcoming ECME is on approach to respiratory infections on 13th of February. Thank you so much, and it's nice to have you all. And stay safe, stay healthy, sir. Thank you all of you. Thank you all the doctors for joining us today.
Thank you.